Hi guys, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be learning what are externalities. We're going to learn what are external benefits and external costs, what are private benefits and private costs, and what are respectively social benefits and social cost. Now, why is this important? This is important because in the next two videos, we're going to be doing merit demerit goods. So we need to set the precedence for that, and all the information that will be taught in this video would and will be used in the next 2-3 videos. Apart from that, also when we're going to be studying about economic systems, especially when we talk about free market economy and the resulting associated disadvantages of it, the argument of externalities and market failure always comes into being over there as well. So we need to sort of understand what externalities are actually. Now, externalities basically occur when the actions or what producers and consumers do. Right now, obviously, the action of a producer is to produce, while the action of a consumer is to consume. So, what the actions of producers, consumers, and individuals, they sort of affect a third person. Now, a third person could be anyone. It could be me, you, or maybe a tree or an animal or anyone. Like it could be anyone. A third person could be anyone, right? When we say third person, it's anyone who is not directly involved in the transaction, right? And these effects are sort of not reflected. That is the externalities effects, the external, whatever effect the third person is having is not really reflected in the market price or in the transaction that is taking place between two individuals or producers and consumers, or in simply the market transactions in the exchange or trade that takes place. So, for instance, a very simple example I could give is that, for instance, if I am smoking, right, and I am smoking a cigarette, and obviously you're standing next to me, and so it's me who's smoking the cigarette, but it's also affecting your health because of passive smoking, right? So you're also getting affected, but you're not going to be compensated for it. I mean, I'm not going to compensate you for it because it's affecting your health. You can't just come up the next day and say, oh, you know what, I was sitting in the metro bus next to you, and you were smoking and I was being affected, so please pay my hospital bill. Because of that, my lungs got affected and I had to stay in the hospital for 3 days. So that's not how markets work. That's not how the system works, right? So that is why we're saying that the third person could be anyone, so who is not directly involved in the transaction, and these effects are not reflected in the market price. I'll explain what this means. That is the effects not being reflected in the market price, because the market price or the market transactions only factors in the private costs and the private benefits, not the third party costs and third party benefits. That is not the external costs and the external benefits. So externalities are of two types. I mean, they're external benefits and external costs, both, right? Because when we're saying that the actions of the producers, so some of the actions could result in positive outcomes, while some could result in negative outcomes. So the negative externalities are the negative outcomes, and the positive externalities are the positive outcomes, right? So if these effect on third parties are harmful, it is a negative externality, also called an external cost. If these effect on third parties is beneficial or it results in positive outcome, it's a positive externality. Now, one thing that you guys need to know is that I want you to write it down as I speak as well, that externalities basically arise. The reason why externalities arise is because markets, when we're talking about markets, we're talking about people who are party to the transaction. That is how much they buy, how much they sell, and at what price do they buy and sell in the market, right? That is what the people who are actually part of the transaction, and at what price and quantity they're buying and selling. So externalities would arise when markets only consider the costs and benefits of buyers and sellers. That is, they only consider the private costs and the private benefits of the buyers and sellers. They don't factor in these externalities, and because they don't factor in the externalities, I mean, the quantities at which the goods and services are bought and sold, they don't really factor in these external costs and benefits. Neither do the market prices factor in these external costs and benefits, and that results in an under or over allocation of resources, and either too much is produced and consumed or too less is produced and consumed. And we'll also see this in the video on merit and demerit goods. So externalities arise because markets only consider the cost and benefit of buyers and sellers, ignoring the impacts on society, and this leads to market failure. When markets fail to allocate resources efficiently from society's viewpoint, that is when we say that free markets does not produce a socially desirable outcomes, resulting into under or over allocation or misallocation of resources taking place. Right now, let's move on to what private costs are. Private costs basically, guys, are those costs that are borne by either the producer or the consumer who is directly taking part in the economic activity. who's directly party to the transaction taking place. So these are costs that the individual decision makers pay. So for example, if I buy a packet of cigarette for, let's say, $100, so that's my private cost, right? Similarly, if a firm is, producing something, maybe a private, a firm is producing, let's say, plastic or steel, so it's going to be paying the wages, the electricity bills, the raw material cost. All of this is basically the private cost of the firm. And if a consumer is buying that steel or plastic, then the consumer is paying for that product, let's say. So that would be the private cost paid by the consumer. And for example, let's say if the consumer is buying petrol, so it's the private cost is the cost of paying for the petrol or the bus ticket, the metro bus ticket that I was paying for. So that is my private cost, right? So that is what private cost is. And on the other hand, if we talk about private benefits are those benefits. But these private costs that we were talking about, they are basically factored in. They are factored in, or they are those costs that the market transactions factor in or internalize. These costs are internal to the market transactions, meaning that they're factored in by the market transactions. They're factored in by the producers and consumers in making their decisions and in deciding how much quantities they should buy or sell, or at what prices they are supposed to sell or buy, right? So the market factors in these costs, right? So private benefits, on the other hand, are those gains that are received by producers or consumers who are directly involved in the activity or trade taking place. For example, a consumer buys a car, so that's his private cost, and on his way back he's enjoying the leisure and the comfort of that car, so that's a private benefit to the consumer. Similarly, a producer is selling those cars, so the revenue that he's earning is a private benefit for producer. And just as private costs, similarly the private benefits are also captured or factored in by the markets, or by the people in the markets who are party to the transaction, or they're captured by the parties who are making these decisions. A consumer would obviously, should he buy the car or not, he would obviously factor in the fact that how much comfort is that car providing to him. That is why we're saying they're factored in by consumers in the markets, and how many cars should the producer make and sell would depend upon how much revenues he would be earning from it. So that's why we're saying that they're factored in. They're considered by the parties in the market who are making these decisions. They're factored in by the market as well, right? Market. What is market? Market is basically with buyers and sellers, the consumers and the producers. That's what market is, right? On the other hand, guys, similarly, when we talk about private cost and private benefit, and this is the video on externality, so we're talking about external cost and external benefit. So we also need to understand or know what external costs and external benefits are, and together they make up the social costs and social benefits. So external costs, on the other hand, are negative externalities, or costs that are imposed on third parties who are not part of the market transaction. They're also known as spillover costs. So external costs are also called spillover costs, right? The reason why they're called spillover costs is because I incur a cost, but that cost is not only limited to me, but then it spills over, and it could spill over in any other form to another person. Just like I bought a cigarette, that was the private cost of me consuming the cigarette, but then there's another private cost involved as well. That is the destruction to my health, which I'm not really aware of even. We'll see that in the demerit goods video. But then there's another private cost there's another external cost associated. It's a cost. The cost of consuming the cigarette is spilling over to other members in society. That is to all the people who are sitting in the metro bus, who are inhaling that smoke and feeling sick and ill because of it, right? So, or you could say, let's say, pollution from the factory that is harming the nearby residents. Now, those nearby residents are not compensated for, right? So another example could be traffic congestion caused by people driving at the rush hour. Now, traffic congestion causes accidents. It causes mental, emotional damage to our emotional peace, right, and health. Again, loud noise causes damage to hearing. It causes damage to our peace. So this loud noise coming from a concert disturbing neighbors, right? So our neighbors are disturbing because they're playing loud noise, and that is affecting me, maybe because I'm teaching a class and that's affecting me, right? So that's again external cost, right? So external benefits, on the other hand, are also known as positive externalities. These are spillover benefits, right? They spill over to the third parties. They are benefits enjoyed by third parties who are not directly involved in the transaction. Not directly involved means that they were not really part of the transaction, right? Example, let's say, uh, and also, by the way, we're talking about external costs. These third parties that we're talking about, the cost imposed on third parties, they bear the burden, but they're not compensated for. Even though they're not compensated for, they're still bearing that burden. And that is why we have to study, economists study it then, because economists want to study the cost because they want to understand that what are the costs associated with the transactions taking place in everyday market and everyday economics, right? So external benefits, on the other hand, are benefits enjoyed by third parties who are not directly involved in the transaction. For instance, let's say, these external benefits, the market itself does not rewards. The market does not rewards the producer or consumer for generating these wider benefits. For instance, let's say that I take medicine for being sick, and because of that I go to class and I'm feeling healthy because of taking that medicine, and as a result of that I am giving a very good class, or in fact I take a vaccine for, let's say, COVID, and that protects the others from getting ill as well, from catching that influenza or virus. And so again, the point is that I took that vaccine, but then others benefited from it as well. So so what we're saying is that you're getting a benefit. Now, I'm not going to come to you and say, oh, you know what, you need to sort of compensate me for making sure that you guys don't get ill. Now, that's not how markets work. That's not how economics works, right? So the market itself doesn't really rewards the producer or the consumer for generating these wider benefits. So for external, the market doesn't really compensates the producer or consumer for generating external benefits. So for instance, and because the market doesn't really rewards the producer or consumer for generating these wider benefits on the third parties, that is also, and so there's less incentive for consuming those goods as well that generate these wider benefits. For example, like, let's say education is a merit good, and we'll learn what merit goods are in the next videos. But education not only has a benefit on me, but it also has a benefit on the wider society or others around me as well. In various, it has an impact on the place I would work. It has an impact on the way I teach. It has an impact on you guys as well who are listening to the video. The more educated and skilled I am, it's not only going to reward me professionally, but also going to turn out as a benefit to you guys as well, who are maybe comprehending from my work and benefiting from my work. So again, point is that, or let's say that and so I am technically sort of contributing to positively in the GDP of the economy, and also contributing, and because the GDP is growing because of me, let's say I am also making a contribution to tax revenue. So these are all the external benefits, but I'm not being rewarded for all of this. I'm just being rewarded for the work that I'm doing and the courses that I'm selling for, right? So what I'm saying is that a homeowner, so what I'm saying is that this is what external sort of benefit is. So for instance, an example could be a homeowner who's maintaining a beautiful garden that improves the neighborhood scenery, and that obviously that's something very good. So that doesn't really generates, that not only generates private benefits for the homeowner, but also external benefits, because it just results in positive health benefits to the overall environment in that neighborhood, right? Similarly, someone getting vaccinated, it reduces the disease spread for others. This is an example I already gave to you guys. Education improving a person's productivity is a private benefit to the person itself, but then that also benefits the employer, wherever I am working. It's benefiting them as well. Point is that yes, I am being rewarded, but then point is that my knowledge and my experience and my skills, and the more educated I am, I'm also benefiting my employer, and I'm also benefiting the society. So these are basically your spillover benefits or positive externalities, right? These are examples of positive externalities. Because and how my education is benefiting the employers is maybe because the more educated I am, the more skillful I am, the less training costs my employer has to incur on me. So I'm saving a lot of bucks and training costs for my employer. Now I'm not going to ask for that money. That, I saved $100 monthly training costs on an economics teacher because I am so well trained and educated. So I need a 10% commission on it, or just give me 10% of it. You keep 90, give me 10%. I deserve it. So that's not how markets work, right? So the third party is not going to get compensated for the external benefits it's generating. That's what I'm trying to explain to you guys over here, right? This brings us to understand what social cost is. You've learned what private cost is, you've learned what external cost is, and together social cost is basically the sum of private cost plus the external cost. So economics says, okay, fine, learn what private cost is, then learn what external cost, and then also learn what social cost is. Social cost is basically the total cost to society as a whole. Now we're looking at society as a whole, right? Not just from the perspective of an individual producer or consumer, and not only from the perspective of third parties, but overall, if we are doing a market transaction, how is the society benefiting? So it's encompassing or factoring in total benefits, that is all the benefits, the private benefits and the external benefits, the private cost and the external cost as well. The social cost is simply the total cost to society from producing one good, from consuming a good or producing something, right? So it includes both the private cost and the external cost. Similarly, social benefit would include both the private benefit and the external benefit. So social cost is simply the sum of the private cost and external cost. That is, it is looking at the cost of consuming and producing from a society's angle. So for instance, a factory is producing steel. So the private cost would be the machinery, labor, electricity, while the external cost would be the pollution that is generated because of that factory releases carbon emissions. It releases carbon emissions that causes climate damage. It causes a harmful damage to people's health. And if we have an estimate on how much health damage that would have, so we could estimate a rough figure for the external costs that are being generated apart from just the private costs being paid. We'll have that cost figure for us, how much machinery we got, how much labor we paid, how much expenses were incurred, what electricity bills we had. But we could also have an estimate on the external cost that is being generated every month or every day or every year, right? Because of the factory polluting the environment, or that could include noise pollution, air pollution, carbon emissions being released, or maybe when the factory was set up, maybe nearby land was being cleared out, the trees were cut in order to make that factory on, let's say, near a river that was once beautifully a tourist attraction. So all of that is external costs, right? Damage to the environment, right? And together, private costs and external costs make up the social cost, right? So social benefits, on the other hand, are the total benefits that a society receives from the production and consumption of a good. So it again includes all the benefits, that is the private benefit and the external benefit, right? So for instance, let's say a student is getting education, and education is a merit good, and you learn about merit goods in the coming videos. But so what is a private benefit to the student of getting educated? Better jobs, higher incomes, more respect. But what about the external benefits because of getting educated? There's also an external benefit. And the external benefit is that, if you have more and more educated people in our society, then you'll also have a more productive workforce from an economic perspective. You'll also have higher tax revenues and GDP for the society as a whole. So that's the external benefit. So together, they make up the social benefits, the private benefits and the external benefits together. If we sum all of this up, if we sum all the benefits to the individual people and the external benefits, that make up the social benefits, right? So what you need to know is what are externalities, what are external costs and external benefit, what are different examples of it, what are private costs, private benefits, what are social costs, social benefits. And this is because the reason why this is important is this is important information for the videos on free markets, because why free markets fail to allocate resource efficiently, or why, let's say, a market economy is not resulting in healthy outcomes. So that is what you need to know. Because in what context a mixed economy or a planned economy is better than a free market economy. And this is exactly the context that in a free market economy, where the price mechanism or the market mechanism dominates these market transactions, they don't really factor in external costs and external benefits. So either too much is produced and consumed and too less is produced or consumed. Especially those goods are produced more and consumed more that are harmful, while beneficial goods and healthy goods like merit goods, they are underconsumed and underproduced, less than what are socially desirable. So we'll study all of this stuff, right, guys? So this is all for this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Share this video with your friends and your peers so that they may benefit from it as well. Do subscribe to my channel. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, take care.